Preserving the African elephant has long been a goal of international conservation, as demand for tusks has placed them on the brink of extinction. China was once the world's largest market for ivory, but since December 31st, the legal trade has been shut down.
这是一只精雕细琢的象牙手镯，它很昂贵。昂贵的不是它的价格，而是背后那一条条大象的生命。为了保护濒危的大象，我国开始实施象牙贸易禁令。
The demand for ivory products in China has reduced in recent years, particularly when the government announced its move to end the domestic trade. In 2014, the average wholesale price of raw ivory in China was $2,100 a kilogram. In 2015, that fell to $1,100, and in 2017, it dropped to $730. But it's still a valuable commodity, because many consumers see the intricately carved pieces as a status symbol. While trade in China has been banned, there aren't rules to stop Chinese buyers heading to places like Japan or Hong Kong, where it's still legal to purchase it. And there's still the illegal market. Chinese authorities have made public displays of destroying illegally imported ivory, and while seizures are down, they still happen. About 110,000 elephants in Africa died from poaching in a decade. There are just 415,000 elephants left on the continent. Wildlife groups and the Chinese government have high hopes this ban will help the population recover. But there's a long road ahead for the animals' survival.
In Eastern Africa, we're back to pre-2008 levels of poaching, but we still see serious problems in Central and Western Africa, and this is where we still have an imminent risk of local extinctions.
So will shutting down the ivory trade in China actually lead to a drop in demand? Or will it encourage buyers to seek it through illegal means? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Shanghai is YG. He's a wildlife researcher who advised the Chinese government on the ivory ban. In London, we have Shruti Suresh, a lawyer and campaigner for the Environmental Investigation Agency. And in Harare, Zimbabwe, we have Tom Milliken. He runs the global monitoring system that tracks the illegal ivory trade for CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. I thank you all for joining us. Tom, let me begin with you. Do you applaud the Chinese for what they've done?
Well, absolutely. China has been driving the illegal trade in ivory since at least 2002. So making a policy decision to close their ivory market in total has the potential to really change the situation. But still, there's a number of issues that need to be addressed. And it's sort of like the checks in the mail. We're not sure how it's all going to come out.
Do you have worries about enforcement, Tom?
Very much. Already in China, there is a thriving illegal market. The more observable part of it in physical markets and on the internet is gradually retreating. But there is at the moment a rather impenetrable social media channel in which, much like WhatsApp in China, there is WeChat, and there are individual groups that are being set up to sell ivory, which, unless you're a member of the group, you can't observe what's going on. And so far, we haven't seen a lot of law enforcement success. So already there is a ready-made channel for illegal ivory trade to continue in China.
Right, that's a good point.
And this is very worrying.
Right, YG, so, you know, China had, what, 172 ivory carving factories and retail outlets. They will close. I guess that's good news. And it's probably easy to do that in a place like China. But what about what Tom is saying, where you have these social media channels like WeChat, where black market can thrive? And of course, you have this immense cultural value of ivory that's deeply embedded in the society. Is it going to be very tough to actually physically get rid of the ivory trade?
Yes, I think so. Because as for the illegal part of the ivory, as we all know, what we can ban are those legal ones. But for illegal ones, they are illegal because they have already been banned according to what the illegal means. So what we need further to do is to tackle those illegal ivory trade and make sure that it do not contribute to the poaching and further illegal trade.
Shruti, how much of a difference will this make globally, given that China has made this decision right now?
This makes a huge difference. China's policy change is one of the most critical contributions to elephant populations, both in Africa and Asia. But I completely agree with Tom that a policy is a policy on paper. It's meaningless if it isn't implemented. And what we need to see now is the Chinese government prioritizing enforcement. And when I say enforcement, I'm talking about arrest, prosecutions of individuals and businesses involved, and the seizure of proceeds of crime. The objective of this is to ensure that ivory trafficking and any form of ivory trade is a high-risk business. Right now, criminals think it's easy to traffic ivory all the way from Africa to China. So we need to make sure that it's too high risk for them to indulge in this crime in the future.
Tom, looking at some of the poaching numbers in a place like Kenya, for example, 390 elephants killed in 2013, according to the best estimates. By 2017, that number fell to 46. Now, that's good news, but is it because the demand went down in places like China, or is it because authorities are doing something right in a place like Kenya as well?
Well, what you get is when, law enforcement is beefed up in terms of anti-poaching in a country like Kenya, then it pulses out and moves somewhere else. I mean, we're aware that at the same time that Kenya's numbers are going up, that serious elephant poaching continues in Central Africa. We've seen record losses in parts of Southern Africa. It shifts around. And this is the issue. And as Shruti just said, I mean, Chinese transnational criminal syndicates are heavily embedded in the trade in Africa. And in fact, I think it's pretty safe to say that they actually control the export out of Africa at this time. And this is an incredible development we've never seen in the post-colonial period, where the country that has the greatest demand is also very much in charge of the supply that is leaving Africa. And this very much confounds the situation.
Okay, so YG, does the Chinese state have to do more in trying to clamp down on those who might be involved in criminal syndicates that come from China and they're involved in Cameroon or Gabon or wherever, as they are involved with the actual poachers themselves?
Yes, definitely. And what Chinese government is doing is just broadcasting the information about the illegal trade. Whenever a Chinese travel abroad to Africa country, if they are using China Mobile, and they will get a message about do not buy illegal ivory in the local market. And also, I want to mention about the range states, the African country which have elephants. I did statistics. Some range states in Africa do not put African elephant in the highest protection level. Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, Cameroon, and Central Africa, just to name a few. All these countries hold over 80% African elephant out of total. In other words, range states which put African elephant in the highest protection level holds less than 20% African elephants.
Okay, so Shruti, is that also a core problem here? These actual states within Africa not taking the threat seriously enough?
Well, the good thing in Africa right now is you have a coalition of African elephant range states of 29 governments coming together, supporting an international ivory trade ban and the closure of domestic ivory markets. So you have, for the first time in several years, a growing consensus in Africa that you need to see ivory markets closed. Now, there is no doubt a problem of lack of capacity, lack of enforcement, even lack of will in terms of actually looking at the criminal syndicates operating in some of these African countries. And the issue of ivory trafficking is an issue of organized criminal transnational trafficking. So no single country, no single government, no single organization can solve it in itself. So it does need African governments cooperating with transit countries and destination countries all along the trade chain to solve this problem. So it's not just a problem about China. It is very much a problem about involving all the players along the trade chain to comprehensively tackle the ivory trade.
And Tom, Hong Kong's not covered by this law, so if I was a criminal, wouldn't I just find a way to game the system through Hong Kong?
Well, we know that is happening. Hong Kong is a major gateway into China and a transit point. But equally, so is Southeast Asia, Vietnam in particular, Laos now. It's shifting around. It's a very dynamic time. And we're even seeing now ivory processing is sort of fleeing the hotspots in Asia and coming to rest in Africa. Over the last 2 years, we've seen ivory processing for the Asian market take root in any number of countries in Africa. And one of the modus operandis now are couriers that carry ivory on their bodies through air travel. Perhaps $20,000 worth of ivory can be hidden on your body, and as long as you have no metal, you go through all those metal detectors. There's almost no collaboration along the trade chain. Hong Kong has busted on 30 different occasions people coming out of Zimbabwe on the same flights over a 3-year period, wearing specially made vests, hiding ivory, and on not one occasion has the Hong Kong government contacted their Zimbabwean counterpoints to say, I think you better monitor this flight. And this is happening all over Africa. And more to the point, when Chinese nationals are arrested in Africa, of course they don't speak English. Nobody can do the interrogations. The information on computers, cell phones, documentation, because it's in a language that's not accessible to Africans, it's all lost.
Right.
And I think China needs to step up to the plate and deputize special wildlife agents that are assigned at various embassies in Africa so that when high-profile criminals are arrested, that these individuals are engaged to come right in and cooperate with their African counterparts, do the interrogations, translate all that information that's going to unravel how these criminal operations and syndicates are operating. And until we see that, we're not going to be out of the woods on ivory trade.
Some fascinating information there, particularly with regards to the ivory mules. Thanks for sharing that with us. Shruti, so we've heard about Vietnam, we've heard about Laos. Japan isn't really joining the international consensus when it comes to the ivory trade. Is that your biggest worry, that some countries just don't care?
Yes, Japan is a bit of an outlier at the moment. As I said before, there is a growing international consensus for the closure of domestic ivory markets in Africa. We've seen the US do it. Within the EU as well, there is a momentum here where there are public consultations taking place to gather evidence and opinions on the need to close ivory markets. And we're hoping that the UK will be announcing draft legislation soon in the next few months on closing its ivory market. We're seeing that in Asia as well. So there is a growing momentum, and Japan is at the moment outside of it. And it is a problem because there is illegal ivory for sale in Japan. Japan's so-called legal ivory registration system has been found to be flawed. Investigations done by our EIA US office have found that the legal system in Japan is abused rampantly. So there is a problem there, and Japan does need to step up to the plate and take measures to close its ivory market. But at the end of the day, it does remain a concern that China is the largest destination for illegal ivory. So the fact that China has made a policy change is huge. And again, just wanted to re-emphasize that what we need to see next is China working with countries in Africa and Asia to ensure that its policy is implemented.
Yeah, and as we look at all the worries, of course, it's natural to do so. As we kind of bring it back to the very beginning, the good news that China made this decision. Let me ask you, YG, to what can we attribute the decision? Was it successful lobbying? Was it marketing? Was it campaigning? Was it Yao Ming's anti-poaching advertising? What brought China on board after all these years?
I think China made the final decision. China is respecting the majority of the international community about the ivory trade issue, and China wants to do more for international community. So finally, China banned the illegal ivory, domestic ivory trade.
Right. All things considered, Tom, after everything we've discussed here as well, and you've laid out your worries as well, all things considered, globally, are we heading in the right direction on this issue?
Well, the proof will be in the pudding when we do the next analysis. The monitoring system I run on illegal ivory trade through 2016 was showing the highest levels going into trade. We'll be doing an analysis later this new year, take it through 2017. But so far on the ground here, we're not seeing, other than isolated places, a massive shift yet. So I don't know how to predict this.
The proof will be in the pudding, or the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Shruti, are you as skeptical or are you more optimistic?
I'm certainly more optimistic, and this is coming from the fact that EIA has done a number of investigations in China and in Africa on ivory trade for several decades now. And in our investigations in China, we actually documented how the legal trade in China was abused. We came across traders and licensed ivory outlets. In fact, some of these outlets have now been closed after the ban came into effect. But some of these outlets were reusing licenses to illegally sell ivory. And the fact that these outlets have now been closed is massive, and it's a progress in the right direction. But at the same time, a few months ago, we published a new report called the Shuedong Connection, where we documented large amounts of ivory going from Mozambique, being smuggled all the way across to mainland China, to a particular town called Shuedong in China. We are aware that some efforts are being made by the Chinese government to look into the information we have published, and we would welcome more information on what happens, and we hope that leads to the prosecution of the criminals that we have documented involved in the trade. But again, just to repeat again, that what has happened is very good, and we hope that this also results in more prosecutions.
Well, it's been great to learn about the ivory trade from all three of you, and of course, elephant poaching as well. Shruti, Suresh, YG, and Tom Milliken. I've got to move on, so I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers.